Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the COVID-19 Global Disruption Update. Once again, we are doing our second week in this COVID-19 related series. These sessions are focused really for the HR professional, but would be applicable to business owners and leaders alike. So just know everybody's invited. Today we're speaking about updates related to shifting changes due to COVID-19. And today's date is April 7th, 2020. Just as a note for the timestamp in case this recording is being viewed at a later date. And speaking of recording, we are recording this webinar. So if you do not want to participate in a recorded session, please exit the recording at this time. And I would also like to take a moment and share that we are not attorneys or tax accountants, and none of the information that we're sharing should be construed as legal or financial advice. We always encourage you to consult those partners in your own businesses for guidance for your own organization. That being said, Jeannie, can you confirm for me that you are still seeing my slides and that we're good to go there?
I am.
Wonderful. So on the phone, you might have just heard her from our team today. We have myself, of course, Amanda Erickson, and then Jeannie Valier, also from HRX Services. Now I'll be presenting the content and Jeannie will be working to moderate, facilitate that chat function and the question and answer section of the webinar. So between the two of us, we hold certifications in PHR, SPHR, SHRM CP, and SHRM SCP designations. But Jeannie, really quickly, would you like to say hello?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am excited to be here and look forward to this presentation and any questions that may come up.
Okay, great. And we're joined today by our colleague and friend, Mike Kohler. Mike, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but if you can you take a minute just to say hello?
He's actually having some technical difficulties, and he said he's fussing with his settings. As soon as he gets them straight, he'll be good to go. So we can go ahead and proceed.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Once again, we appreciate your patience as we work through some of these technical things. Again, wanting to make sure our webinars are secure, so it might take just a few more minutes in this session. Speaking of, let's do a little housekeeping. So once again, we're trying to make this as interactive as possible. So a little refresher for those joining in today and who may have been on our webinars in the past. And for you newbies, welcome. We want to walk through a little functionality in the system we're using. So first, find your tools box. Again, it might be hidden below, so you'll need to hover down below at the bottom of your screen. And what I'd like you to do is see if you can find that raise hand function, just so we can test and make sure everybody is hearing me and tracking with things. If you found it, go ahead and click that and raise your hand now. Fantastic. We're almost 100% compliant, so I think we're looking good there. We're also going to be doing some things using the polling feature, so let's practice that right now. A couple of things Jeannie's going to confirm for us that you can see the polls. Once more, we're just testing to make sure everything is working. So let's practice it. I'm going to enable the first poll totally for fun, and let's go ahead and see if we can relaunch that. Jeannie, I'll let you know as soon as it looks like it's working on my end. Looks like it should be up. Now. Thank you. Yep. Okay, so let's go ahead, everybody, plug in your votes. And give it just a couple more minutes to make sure everybody gets a chance to plug in their perspectives. And we'll end the polling, and hopefully I can share the results.
And I see them now.
Thank you. So we got a lot of beach goers. Don't blame you. I think we all wish we could be at the beach right now. So that said, that's kind of how polling works. So we're going to make sure that we have that opportunity to check in there throughout the presentation, and we'll go forward from there. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing those results, and we're going to continue on. So just a few other notes. There is a chatbot feature, which is similar to any other chat feature that you've used in other webinar sessions. This is similar in context. So just certainly make sure if you need to check in or do different things, you're welcome to do that. But outside of that, we are asking and directing people to use the Q&A box function if we can. This will allow us to engage a little more and also share out some answers to the rest of the team. And most importantly, with that Q&A box, we can pull a report. And so once we pull that report at the end, we can take those questions from that question and answer session in order to use it in future sessions. So I want to note at this time that we're hoping for Q&A time generally, but that's really what our Thursday session is designed for. So for the next few weeks, we have a Tuesday content-based session, which is the session you're in today. And then Thursday is more of a question and answer forum session. So please look for that sign up if you're interested in a forum type session instead, or if that's something that you want to do in addition to this type of webinar. Okay, so moving forward, let's go ahead and continue. Jeannie, I'm going to mute you just so that the camera stays on me. So go ahead and unmute yourself when we need to, okay? Okay. So first and foremost, our goals for the day, we're going to talk about some compliance updates, what's going on with the FFCRA at this time. We want to share with you what we would want to know right now. So I've looked through the question and answers, we've looked and watched many webinars, and really we're just sharing kind of that perspective of the things that we think would be important to understand. We're going to touch on the CARES Act, but I truly think that's more of a financial aspect of what we're looking for when it comes to the provisions in that act in particular. So we're going to touch on the things that really do hit the HR space, but for the most part, that's going to be very light touch today. And then we're going to talk about well-being, because I think in general, we're just trying to figure out how we stay positive during these types of situations and during a pandemic. And then leave needs we'll touch on a little bit as well. Okay, so moving forward, our new updates, the things that we have found or clarification points, maybe pieces that we didn't know before, certainly this would be helpful. So this is a high-level overview of the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. The new regulation was initiated in response to employees needing to take leave from work because of a COVID-19 related need. It allowed them to be able to continue to earn money and support themselves and their families. There are many pieces to this act, but the employer-specific ones we feel like you should know right now include the following. So unemployment, they expanded unemployment options, which include things like making sure your employees are aware of their unemployment options, should you need to change your employee's work status. And this would be including things like a reduction of hours or a layoff or a furlough. Those are the types of events that might occur. Healthcare, so included benefits related mandates so that every health plan, whether you're self-funded, fully insured, grandfathered, individual, exchange plans, all of them are going to be required to allow for COVID-19 testing. So for high deductible health plans, the nice thing is that this structure of that no cost testing won't jeopardize the structure of the high deductible health plan in general. And then tax credits are being used to pay for some of these programs. So from our understanding, these are tax credits that would be applicable on a quarterly basis. And so to account for any funds that you might need to supplement to pay for the paid sick leave or other provisions in the act. Now, again, we're not tax accountants, so we can't give advice on how this will work for individual businesses, but certainly encourage you to reach out to your accounting teams if you haven't already done so. So the two main factors, the things that we're really looking at is going to be that paid sick leave aspect, and then of course the Expanded Family Medical Leave Act. And again, if you were on the session last week, this might be a little bit redundant in those spaces, but we certainly have pulled in the pieces that we think were further clarity and clarifications that have been released since that last webinar. Okay, so paid sick leave. So again, what the purpose of it is to provide sick leave when it's required. The 80 hours is how much sick leave would be available for this particular piece of this legislation. This is an employer paid benefit to employees, again, with reimbursements or the tax credits to really supplement the need to do that for your employees. And which employers? This would be employers with 500 employees or less. And your employees that would be eligible for this type of leave would be employees that have worked with you from the first day of employment. So it is eligible as of day one. And then when did this start? Well, it started on April 1st of 2020, and it is designed to move through until the end of this year, so December 31st of 2020. So really quickly, just again, going to walk through some of the paid sick leave and when it applies. And I'm going to find my little flashlight and see if I can help with some of this. So we really have a situation where employees unable to work or telework. And there's really two different conditions that this would apply. So the first would be for their own condition, so individually. And those are the three areas or the three reasons that that would apply for an individual's own health-related issue. And then the other one would be for a caring for another person in the home. So the two main spaces for that would be if somebody, an individual in the house, is experiencing COVID-19 related symptoms, or we have a minor in the house, so under the age of 18 is what we've learned, has no child care or school options available. So again, all of these things, hopefully things that you are familiar with as far as the reasons for leave. And then what that would constitute is the employees for their own health condition would be paid out at regular pay, but there is a cap at $511 per day or up to $5,110 in aggregate. And that would be a total of 80 hours if you're full-time. And it would be prorated if you're part-time. And again, an interesting caveat there is that a full-time employee, according to this particular act, would be someone who is working 40 hours or more. So if your employee is standardly scheduled to work less hours than 40, but you might consider them full-time, that's not necessarily what the act would require. And then again, if you're doing a caring for another person in the home, then that would be at 2/3 of the pay. And we also have some caps here at $200 a day or a $2,000 aggregate pay total. And again, we're looking at the 80 hours or prorated for part-time. Now, the only last piece is this down here, which is any other substantially similar position. And I'll be honest, I think that we're still not quite clear on what that means. So it's kind of this catch-all that we have available. But once again, there's no clarity, and it even says in the questions and answers that they're still kind of waiting to decide what that means. Okay, so moving forward, let's talk about then some clarifications in that piece. So when we're talking about clarifications to the reason for leave, there is some now further guidance on that. So it says when I'm eligible for paid sick leave, to care for someone who's subject to a quarantine or isolation order. What does that mean? So generally speaking, if you remember, it said that it needs to be an individual in the home. Well, they've further decided what that really qualifies as. So we have an individual who genuinely needs your care, and that such an individual includes an immediate family member or someone who regularly resides in your home. So again, not just any individual, but specific to this type of individual. Additionally, some of the clarifications they had around the concept of what is a child care provider. So a child care provider, someone who cares for your child. So this could certainly be someone that is a licensed care provider, daycare setting, something like that. But it also includes individuals who provide child care at no cost or without a license on a regular basis. So for example, like a grandparent or an aunt or uncle, or even a neighbor, if that was normally your child care situation. So again, just some further clarity on some of those pieces. So the next piece that we're going to talk about is the expanded FMLA. And so the EFMLA and when it would apply. So expanded FMLA is for the purpose of that child care or school closure, which I know that we have extended our stay-at-home orders here, at least in the state, for Colorado. And so this may be applicable. I believe that Poudre school districts are going all the way now through the end of the year. I know some other school districts are looking to follow suit. So this definitely could be applicable for some of your folks. So when we're looking at that, when does this apply, or when do I need to adhere to this act? So again, a little redundant, but want to make sure everybody's tracking. So employer has 500 or less employees. The employee has been with the company for at least 30 days or more. So unlike the paid sick leave, which would be available from day one of employment, this one does require a little bit longer tenure in order to be considered to be applicable. As well as the employee is unable to work or telework from home. Now, when it might be possible, so or what the leave may be possible to have would be 12 weeks of job protected leave. Those first 10 days are considered unpaid as part of this provision of the Act. Now, again, that paid sick leave is designed to work together with this so that that first 10 days could be covered under that paid sick leave piece. The rate then follows more of that other person category from paid sick leave. So you're going to continue working or being paid at that 2/3 the employee's regular rate of pay. And compensation, once again, is capped at that $200 a day or $10,000 in aggregate total. So the part-time employee, again, we want to make sure that we're still including those folks. Anybody under 40 hours technically is considered part-time according to this regulation. And the average number of hours in the prior 6 months is what you could use if you had an employee whose schedule kind of varied and you weren't sure. So in order to do that calculation, you'd go back to those 6 months and take a look. The other piece, because it is expanding that FMLA piece, we do have this job restoration component. And this would be something that would be required. However, if you have 25 employees or less, then it may not be required if the position is not available. And what's interesting about that is also we have some further guidance and clarifications on that piece. So a couple of things to note that I think are interesting are going to come up in the next slide, which talks about a little bit of how expanded FMLA or EFMLA works with regular FMLA, as well as whether or not you can take that leave intermittently. Again, very similar to how FMLA would work in and of itself. Jeannie, before I kind of move in, any questions, or are we still doing okay so far?
So we have one question, but it's a pretty involved answer, so we'll try to fit it in towards the end if we can. But
okay,
other than
perfect.
that, we are good to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And once again, just wanted to let you know that anything that we don't get to here, we are going to do on our Thursday session, and we'll provide those answers back, and that's kind of part of that design. So if we don't get to it here, we will move forward and make sure we address it on Thursday. And those sessions will also be recorded, so if you can't make it, we certainly will send out the link to the recorded session. Okay, so one of the areas that has been clarified through the questions and answers document, and again, if you're not familiar with that, it's a great tool. There's about 70 questions and answers on there. So if you are interested in looking at that for yourself, certainly encourage you to do so. At the end of this webinar and in our slide deck, we will provide links to all of those resources, so you should be able to look at that for yourself as well. But one of those areas that's been clarified, and we didn't necessarily know before, kind of assumed that they would work tandemly, is how EFMLA would work versus FMLA and how they'd work together. So one of the interesting components here is that it says, may I take leave under FMLA? Oops, sorry. Let me go back. One slide. Okay. So it says, may I take leave under the FMLA Act over the next 12 months if I use some or all of my expanded FMLA under the FMLA Leave Expansion Act? So the answer here is it depends. So you may take a total of 12 work weeks during a 12-month period under FMLA. Now, as we know, that FMLA covered employers, there are several different ways that you can track how you maintain your year-long timeline or your 12-month timeline. So that's definitely something to note there. But they do give an example. So they say, for example, if you assume you take 4 weeks of expanded FMLA leave in April and due to a school closure, And then that will count against your 12 weeks of FMLA in the 12-month period. So if you're eligible for pre-existing FMLA leave, like for the need, let's say, to have a surgery, as the example is suggesting, in August of 2020, you would be entitled to take 8 weeks of the remainder of that 12-week period. So again, something a little bit different than what we had initially thought might be how they would handle this, but it is something to note. So you're really looking at a 12-week total timeline. However, it also says that they're pretty clear about this, that if you're entitled to paid sick leave under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, regardless of how much leave you've taken under FMLA, that paid sick leave is not an expansion to the FMLA piece. So you would still qualify for some of those pieces. So again, just something to understand how this all works together. It can be a little bit more detailed than maybe we initially had thought. So additionally, we talk about that job restoration piece. So when we're saying that if you're under 25 employees, that can you not have to restore someone back to their original position, it does say that your employer may refuse to return you to work to the position if you're a highly compensated key employee, which is very similar to how FMLA works, that you have those key employees, or if you have fewer than 25 people. Now, one of the things that they talk about is that all 4 of the hardship conditions should exist. So again, this is verbatim, just copied and pasted from the question and answers. So these are the 4 areas. So your position no longer exists due to economic or operating conditions, and this is all related to COVID. Your employer made reasonable efforts to restore you to an equivalent type position. Your employer makes reasonable efforts to contact you if equivalent position becomes available. And that timeline looks like it's going to be 1 year, beginning either on the date that the leave to COVID-related reasons concludes, or 12 weeks after your leave began, whichever is earlier. So again, a little more clarification on how that would work if you were not able to restore someone to their previous position. Okay, so let's talk about some exemptions that may occur. So small business exemption. This is something that came out very early last week, right before our first webinar. So we just want to kind of talk a little bit more about what that means. So for small businesses, guidance was just updated on this recently in the Q&A. So there are 3 big reasons for the exemption. This would mean that having to comply with the provision would impact your business for these types of reasons. So in order to not comply, essentially, you would need one of these reasons at least. So the first would be an expense of the leave would be significantly debilitating to the small business. So if you were to have to provide that, that would be really harmful to your organization. The second is that there are not enough workers. There are not enough qualified, willing, and able workers available, and the small business would need them to operate at a minimal capacity. And the third is the absence of skilled and knowledgeable employees would be detrimental to the business. So again, these are the reasons that you wouldn't be able to comply and offer those leaves would have to be one of these reasons. And they further kind of explain that when they talk about how to qualify. So to qualify for an exemption, the employer needs to employ fewer than 50 employees, that the leave is requested because the child's school or place of care is closed, or the child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 related reasons. That's very important. And an authorized officer of the business has determined that at least one of the 3 conditions described in the previous section is met and is satisfied. But one thing to note is that the government says that's great, you might want to document all of those things, but not to send materials to the DOL when seeking an exemption. So if you have real questions on this, this would be another one of those I would touch base with legal counsel to make sure if you're trying to qualify for an exemption that this is something that would qualify. Okay, so moving forward, and again, this was something that we talked about last week. I think it was a little bit surprising to some of us, but just once more trying to kind of qualify, what does it mean? What is Families First Coronavirus Response Act about, and what really doesn't qualify? So as we're reviewing it, some of the things that, were something we didn't anticipate being excludable, but really gave some clarity on, were addressed in the questions and answers. So the first would be reduction of hours. So leaves that are not available to employees with reduced hours. So if you had reduced hours just because business was slow, for example, this is not a COVID in and of itself related reason. And so just because you have a reduction of hours does not necessarily mean that you would qualify for this leave. Additionally, stay at home. So whether there are federal, state, or local shelter in place or stay at home orders or business slowdowns, probably because of those orders, that even that's still not considered necessarily a COVID related need for leave under this act. April 1st due date. So we talked about that. That's certainly something that we want to make sure is clear. And whether or not your employee wants to use the leave or use their own leave that they might have available under vacation pay is really something that is determined from the employee side. And documentation. So this is a key piece that we're going to talk about in a coming slide as well, because there's further guidance around that. And then one thing that we added was that intermittent leave. And so if the employer allows for leave, you and the employee, so the employee and the employer may agree that they can take that leave intermittently. And that's a key component. So there's a lot of collaboration about whether or not the employer and the employee could see the need for intermittent leave, but it really is allowable by the employer. Okay. Again, kind of a change, a little bit of an update there. So as far as the medical coverage, so one of the things that we also wanted to try to kind of talk about is that there's this component to benefits. We've heard a lot of different things happening from benefits providers to certain carriers allowing for some leniency on being able to what is considered an active at work employee, some of those things. Again, we're not working with carriers directly. So I would encourage you to speak with your broker and make sure you talk with your partners in that space to make sure you know what your carrier is or is not doing. But some of the things just to kind of understand is that benefits would continue during EFMLA and normal and paid sick leave. And this would be like normal contributions continue. I know that some employers may cover that cost. It really just depends on what your strategy is. And if you do not return at the end of your expanded FMLA, then you want to check with your employer about like, how do we work through the employee-employer contribution if they're going to allow you to continue in some modification of that. But certainly if not, then there is that COBRA or Colorado continuation piece if you have under 20 employees. So once more, something just to kind of manage and look at with your partners and some of the tools and systems that you need to be kind of managing while you're working through this process. And we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Okay, so requirements for documentation. So there are some steps you need to do in order to be able to notify employees of these changes. And these are some things that we think would be helpful as well. So kind of a little bit of combination of just some best practice and ideas, and then also what is required. So first, documentation. Now, one of the things that we have really heard is that this needs to be something that is a virus-based need for leave. So it really has to be COVID related for one of those 6 reasons under the paid sick leave or a child care issue, again, COVID related for the EFMLA. Now, having the type of documentation template is important. We know that we have some clients who have some really great tools and templates of their own, and then certainly things that we're working with them on. But I would encourage you to work with your HR teams or your partners or consulting companies like HRX if you're a client, and make sure that you're drafting something and have something put together for that purpose. And I will cover this in a little more detail because again, we did have some expanded clarity and clarifications in the question and answers. Now, as far as notification requirements, so there is that FFCRA poster, which is now available certainly and technically needs to be posted, and I say that quote unquote, by 4/1 of 2020, so as of last week. Now, the requirements are that you must share with all active employees and all businesses which are considered covered employers are required to post. And again, required to post as of 4/1. So some of those posting requirements is to post in a conspicuous place on premises, which is, like we have said, kind of interesting because everybody's working remotely. So what does that mean? They have said that you can email or direct mail the notice to your employees. We recommend that if you do that, a read receipt on those emails is not a bad idea, especially if you don't have electronic disclosure notice already in play with your employees, then certainly something you'd want to have referenced in future if you needed to. And then of course you can post on employee informational, external or internal intranets, and sites that might be available for employees and portals that they can access easily. Also, we would encourage having maybe some type of signature or something that says that they have received it and they do understand that. It's also something that can be best practice. So I'm going to take a minute and just say hands raised. So again, looking at your tool functions, how many people have complied with this and feel like their posting is all good to go? Great. So we're about half, 50%. That's awesome. So something to know for the other 50% who maybe haven't quite got there yet. There is a temporary non-enforcement period of 30 days from the date of the act, which was 4/17/2020. At least that's what we understand, that you could have acted with a good faith effort. So let's consider this kind of beyond notice, something you want to get out there and make sure. And again, in the resources that we send out with this recording and the slide templates, you will be able to have access and a link directly to that poster. Okay, so let's continue and talk a little bit then about what the documentation requirements the government is kind of looking for. So again, we kind of really have those three different areas. We have the person's own leave requirements, we have the other person or any individual in the home, and then we have that child care need. And so they have given us some information in our template just to understand what it is that they're requiring from us. So the statement that they provide is that private sector employers that provide paid sick leave and expanded family medical leave required by FFCRA are eligible for reimbursement of the cost of that leave through refundable tax credits. So if you intend to claim that tax credit for your payment of the sick leave or the EFMLA, then you should retain appropriate documentation in your records. They talk about consulting IRS applicable forms, instructions, and information for procedures that must be followed to claim that tax credit. So including any needed substantiation, which would be this, to be retained to support the credit. So if you're not required to provide leave material sufficient, or you're not required to provide leave if the person who provides you back the information regarding their leave is not substantiated or isn't sufficient, then you're not required to provide that leave for them either. So it's just something to kind of note. Again, we'll send these out, so if you do have questions, feel free to reach out, but otherwise, hopefully this will kind of help guide you through, again, just copy and pasted from the question and answers for clarification.
Amanda, we did have one question.
Sure.
They asked how long should they retain said documentation?
So I think that our guidance, and Jeannie, please feel free to correct or add. I think the guidance that we've been told is for 4 years.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so let's talk about some of the other important updates and things that we would want to know now. So not just based on the things that we've talked about before, how the Act works, but maybe some additional things that I was like, oh, this would be helpful. I'd want to know this. So the first thing is, what clarifications on who qualifies as an employee. So this specifically to me was more addressed, and I know that there's a lot of language here, so I'm just going to kind of highlight it. Again, this will be available through the slides. So staffing and temporary employees. So you might have some staffing, you might have some temporary employees, and so this is kind of tough. And so I think we need to define, what is an employee? So generally, it seems that the staffing company, when we're talking about it, we're having to ask, okay, as an employer, do I know if my business is under 500 employee threshold? And so some of the guidance is really geared toward, you should include employees on leave, temporary employees who are jointly employed by both you and another employer. So if you do have that staffing situation, technically those employees could be considered joint employees. And so definitely what this is used to do is to design whether or not you're that 500 employee, whether you hit that or not. Now, there are some other joint employer qualifications in that are much more complicated. So if you do have a business structure where you have a few entities or some common ownership happening, I would really encourage you to seek legal counsel to make sure, if you haven't already done so. Now, assuming I'm a covered employer, which means that yes, I do have to provide this leave, then which of my employees are eligible for paid sick leave and EFMLA? So again, they're looking at eligibility here and saying, including full-time, part-time employees and joint employees working on site temporarily or through a temp agency. So then it comes down to asking, okay, well, if I'm a staffing company, then how do I count internal workers and staff workers under FFCRA? And generally speaking, it talks about that since they're potentially eligible for this leave, that ultimately you're going to count all employees on your payroll. So Jeannie and I have kind of gone back and forth about, well, what does that mean and how does that work? And I think ultimately for us, it seems that the staffing company is looking to have to pay leave for the employees if they're working on site, as long as they follow under that covered employer. And, if you're not sure, especially because those are the employees that would be on that payroll, and if an employee is not working for a client, then they're probably not getting billed for that work. Again, if you're doing a temporary employee situation through an agency. If you have specific questions around your specific relationship with your employee and staffing agency, we think taking a look at your agreement would help solidify how that contract works and what the requirements may be. And if you have certainly further questions on this, I think that there's enough gray area that we would encourage you to seek legal counsel and see what they would say. But at the end of the day, we want to remember that this person still must be working or teleworking regular hours in order to really qualify for this leave. So perhaps it's less of a going concern than it seems. That might be the case. If you've had to reduce hours, more than likely you've probably reduced your hours for your temporary folks as well or altogether. So that might be something that maybe less of an issue, but just something to consider. The other thing that we also wanted to share is that one of the pieces that they clarify is the actions to take if you believe there's a violation. And I just wanted to really just make sure and highlight kind of what that process looks like. So we kind of have this 1, 2, 3 step approach. So the question, what do I do if my employer, who I believe to be covered, refuses to provide me expanded family medical leave to care for my son or daughter whose school or place of work is closed for COVID-related reasons? And I think that they first say, okay, well, we're encouraging you to raise and try to answer and resolve your concerns with your employer directly. So they're encouraging this kind of interactive process. But it also says, regardless whether you discuss with your concerns with your employer, you may also call the Wage and Hour Division, and they give that kind of feedback here, as well as without notifying or contacting Wage and Hour Division, you may also file a lawsuit against your employer directly. So it's just kind of like, boom, there we are. So I think it's really important that we want to make sure that we're taking consideration for addressing these, because I think, again, Jeannie and I have had those conversations with HR leaders out there. Well, whose responsibility is it? Who do we need to engage with, or who's responsible for kind of interacting in this discussion and make sure that we're offering leave where we need to be? I think that this is something that we should be taking into consideration when we're thinking about that, and making sure that we're having those discussions with employees when we need to be. Okay, so enough of that. Let's talk about CARES. And again, really just trying to provide some high-level direction here. So CARES is really designed as a providing alternative to closure and layoffs. So the CARES Act gives employers the following options, benefits, which may allow them to stay open, and the principal focus areas that we think are applicable to kind of HR would include areas related to the financial side, so obviously pay, as well as unemployment, healthcare, and then certainly there are individual needs that are addressed as well. And so from financial assistance, again, this would be like SBA loans, emergency grants. I think that we're all pretty familiar with the Paycheck Protection Program at this point and some other SBA loans or additional opportunities for funding. So just something to connect with your financial advisor about. I know there's a lot of work that goes into both your financial person, your banking side, and then also that payroll piece. So certainly something that all three need to connect and move forward together. Unemployment. So we've seen that typically there's a kind of a 26 weeks. This has been moved to 39 weeks. There's been an additional $600 added to that weekly benefit cap of whatever that was. Now that cap, based on our understanding, does exhaust at the end of July. So that $600 additional amount is only for a shorter period of time. And this does apply kind of to all workers around. And this is, even though that this is something that is kind of that federal mandate, they are looking to the states to say you are administering. And so at least as of last week on Friday, when I was looking at Colorado unemployment, they still weren't quite sure on how they were going to move that. And they were citing needing additional guidance from the federal side in order to really be able to execute this. So just from a Colorado perspective alone, something to kind of consider. And then certainly we know that there are those rebate programs that are coming to individuals as well. Okay, so let's talk about review of leave. So I'm going to execute another poll here. Let's see if we can do this. We're going to try. And this one, I just want to see, you know, if you're talking about or looking at doing, you know, some type of reduction in force, I think, or like some type of leave, that would be really great. So just wanting to kind of find this out. And Jeannie, let me know.
I see your poll.
Great. So again, this is a multiple choice, so please feel free to reply in kind to however many are applicable to you. I'm just purely curious, really. So we're gonna give it a couple more moments. And we'll end the poll. And I will share results. So as we're looking at this, you know, some of the things that we're considering is, I think a lot of people are doing a lot of different things, right? So we're doing a furlough.
No results yet, Amanda.
Okay, thank you. Let me just try one more time. Let's see.
There you go.
Thank you. So what's interesting to me when we're looking at this is, you know, I think most people are really trying to do maybe a variety of different things, looking at it, talking about, you know, reduction in hours seems to be the biggest, reduction of wages, and of course that furlough. So layoffs still kind of down the line there a little bit. And we do have somebody participating in the work share program, which I think is fantastic. And so if that's not something that you're familiar with, certainly would encourage you taking a look at that on the CDLE website. So just interesting. So let's talk about, you know, the different types of leave really that we see all around. So when we're looking at leave in general, we're talking about, you know, we've got just some basic leave needs when it comes to FMLA, of course, our new mandate of the FFCRA, and then we also have our employer paid options. And so under all of those, we've got different types of leave that could occur in those situations. Short-term, long-term disability, we've got the paid sick leave and EFMLA. And then, of course, our PTO or vacation sick, whatever philosophy your organization may be working through. On the other hand, we've got kind of this reduction of pay philosophy, so to speak, where we have now a layoff situation potentially or a furlough. And then in those circumstances, we certainly have unemployment options happening, as well as we've got work share or job attached, like how are we doing those layoffs? And then our termination, whether or not we're really terminating someone either because they've quit, voluntary leave or voluntary termination, or because of a performance-based measure, something like that, which would be different than, a layoff situation. And so we're managing a lot of type of information here. And one of the things that I wanted to just kind of bring to attention is just, well, when we're doing that, we need some tools. We need to have some understand for how we're going to track all of that. So these are all the areas that, really high level, I think, kind of touch in on some of that piece. So we've got our payroll providers, we've got benefit administration tools, depending on what type of leave or what type of a situation you might be in, whether or not people need to be notified, whether or not COBRA would apply, those types of things. And then you certainly have your vendor relationships. So we're talking about short-term disability, long-term disability. When does that apply, and when do those things come into consideration? And so this is going to be my shameless plug for Thursday, where we're going to have Kate Feeney from Tilt, and they are a leave provider. Like they do software tools for leave, and she's going to be my guest panelist on Thursday. So there's going to be a lot of question and answers around how do we manage these types of leaves. And she's an employment attorney as well as the COO of that organization. So I would check to tune in there, because you might have some specific questions that she would be really great to ask for. And then as far as FMLA requirements, so again, we've got those timelines that we need to be managing. When we need to deliver information, 5 business days, 15 calendar days, 5 business days. When we're talking about FMLA, we still have certification requests, notification, and documentation. So there's a lot happening here. And this is about the time where some of those catalyst things are going to start really kicking in. So if you're uncomfortable or not sure about the tools that you're using, or not certain, or haven't talked to some of these vendors within the last couple of weeks, I would encourage you to do so, mainly just because there's going to be a lot happening in the coming weeks ahead. So as far as well-being, so another poll. Let's go ahead. Let's do this. This poll is going to be really focused more on general feelings, just concern, just wanting to see how people are doing. Again, this is multiple choice because you might be feeling lots of different things. So I have executed the poll. Jeannie, can you confirm?
It is there.
Thank you. Okay, just give it a couple more seconds. Let anybody else come in that wants to. And I'm going to go ahead and end the polling. And let's see, sharing results. Jeannie, do you see that?
I do.
Great. So I think we're kind of a mixed bag. Makes sense. I feel a little bit of a mixed bag myself at the moment. Optimistic, positive. I think naturally that's wonderful. We certainly want to be able to be helpful, supported, and supportive. So I love seeing those. And I think we can all agree that there's a lot of challenges happening and certainly struggling. I know that we have those kind of daily. So just again, let's talk a little bit about how we can make sure that we're trying to stay in that well-being. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing our results. And we'll move back to our slideshow. Okay, so tools for well-being, work-life balance. So this isn't a thing. It's actually something that I try to share as much as I can. My personal thinking around this is that the work-life balance, there's this idea that we're just like, this guy right here, that on one end over on this side, is our professional career and our movement and growth and opportunity. And on the other side is our family. And it kind of feels like if we're balancing, we're just teetering on the edge. And at one point I'm going to squash my family or I'm going to squash my career, just because there's a really tight balance that we're trying to keep. So in my mind, it doesn't work well for me to think of it that way. So I look at it more as like a work-life harmony or work-life flexibility. Like I allow myself to say, you know what, sometimes I am responding to that email at 10 o'clock at night, but then at 4, when I need to be there to help my kiddo with his online homework now, or whatever it is that might need to require my attention, I'm going to allow myself that grace. And so I think that we need to remember that it's okay. And that we also need to turn it off. And that's hard to do, especially in remote environments. It's easy. It's always here. So I think it's really important to just make sure that we try to maintain that flexibility in ourselves and with our people, and making sure that we're staying connected in that way. I think also something that probably see underutilized a lot of the time, hopefully people are engaging with now, is an EAP program of sorts. Oftentimes that is part of a benefit package that you may already have. And I think that that's really important to utilize and get out and be aware of. And this doesn't have to be just for employees. This can be for HR professionals that maybe you've had to help with a furlough or a layoff recently. And that's tough. That's tough for you too. So there are usually counseling sessions, there's financial pieces to it. And I would really encourage you, we know some really great partners in that space, and they're ready. They know what you need right now and can be helpful. So I would certainly encourage you to continue to engage in that space. Some personal vendor relationships, outside of that, really making sure you're connecting with your accounting folks and other people, because there are mortgage options and different tools and ways that you could be able to have a little forgiveness there right now, because people might be really, really stressed out about financial considerations. And those are things that we want to take seriously. So having that kind of form, I think, would be really important as well. And then certainly maintaining our connections. So working through virtual family happy hours, connecting with your people, whoever that might be, as we know, working together, we've built relationships with our employees, we've built relationships with our coworkers and colleagues, and that's okay. Have a coffee meeting over GoToMeeting or Zoom or whatever tool you use, but certainly encourage you to make sure that we stay there. And one of the areas we focus on here, at least in my family, is kind of across the fence, right? So we've got our neighbors. We're happily out on our patios trying to have a lunch break, and there's a lot of how are you doing, checking in, thumbs up, that kind of thing. So I think it's just really important that we just continue to maintain that aspect of community, even while we're trying to do it virtually. So last but not least, again, I used this as my end slide last time, and I think it just is so relevant. We're in this together and we're better together. So we want to be stronger in the outcome. And that's easier to do when we're trying to work forward as a community, as a team, as colleagues, as HR professionals and business owners. Remember, there's an end. We're not still quite clear on where that might be or where that might come, but really being able to connect and move forward together is going to be really, really important. So that said, like I said, once again, I knew we would come up, and apologies again for the technical issues that we had at the beginning. We are figuring this out, and we appreciate your patience. This is recorded, so I will send this out for everyone who registered. But Jeannie, I don't think we have questions, but I know that we had some come in. So I do want to encourage you. We're going to send out a survey, and there's a spot for questions there. Even if you register for the next session, we're going to record that, and that will be mainly questions and answers for as long as we can. Either an hour will end, or we'll get through the questions that we had. So certainly we want to make sure, once again, Kate Feeney will be my guest panelist with Tilt, and we'll work through many common questions at that time. My little disclaimer here, I'd like to remind you, recording this session, so a copy of the recording, that survey and the slides will come back out. And once more, we're not attorneys or tax accountants. Please understand that we're not sharing legal or financial guidance from those perspectives. That said, I want to thank you for your time today and really appreciate that. Jeannie, anything to add?
We did have a couple of questions, and we will send follow-up answers when you send out the slides.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your work that you're doing. We'll talk with you soon.